This week on Me, Myself and Why, I sit down with someone very special. Tony is the dad of one of my dearest friends. We've known each other for 18 years, and it was a real honour to finally have this conversation with him. Tony and his wife Julie have spent decades growing avocados in the far north of New Zealand. Absolutely stunning, by the way. But more recently, Tony's turned his attention to coffee, and he's doing it with a big picture vision. What struck me most is how they've constantly adapted, tried new things, and never stopped learning. In this episode, we talk about where it all began, the future of coffee in Aotearoa, what it takes to evolve in horticulture, and how Tony stays so grounded, even when things don't go to plan. We chat about how he defines success, what keeps him moving, and whether he'll ever really stop. It's a beautiful reminder that fulfillment doesn't follow a set path, and that finding your why is less about a destination and more about how you choose to show up each day. I hope you enjoy. Back when you started doing avocados, there was that mentality that you get into a good, secure job and you stick it out.
The general mentality for everybody was get a good job, get a good education first of all, get a good job and get a good safe job that paid well and have a boring life, generally. And we weren't into that. We just decided that we wanted to do something for ourselves, work for ourselves. That took a long time because you actually have to build a asset and clear some debt before you can work for yourself totally. So that took 20 years. But. And then so we bought a property and then slowly developed it over time. Avos were a crop that was up and coming up here in the far north.
I was going to say, how did you choose avocados?
Well, there was a group in the local fruit grower society that sort of focused in on several crops, and avos was one of them. Another one was feijoas. The other one was tamarillos. One guy was growing cherimoya, which is another subtropical crop. But we had an American guy here, Jim Clark, who had worked and lived on an avocado farm in California, and he was sort of the driving force to sort of start the ball rolling in a bigger scale. There was a couple of guys already growing avos. One guy had been growing them for 2 or 3 years when we first started. And we just evolved from there. And we all learned off each other and had regular meetings and basically built an industry that wasn't here in the first place. We just built it from nothing. So we ended up with that farm, and then, as I said earlier, we were developing other farms to support our income. And we did that for most right up till recent times. We developed a lot of the big orchards up here. So we went from our own 20-acre orchard to sort of 200 or 300 acres of orchards we developed. And then, so I've always had interest in other crops as well, but as I say, I had that book, I got that book for my 50th, and we saw that coffee had a similar temperature range to here, because we live in a coastal climate, so the oceans, we're halfway between the Pacific and the Tasman Ocean, and so we get very temperate climates. We don't get extremes, we don't get extremely hot, and we don't get extremely cold. So as I said earlier, the coffee's grown normally at tropical countries at high altitude to get the same temperate climate range. And what it basically means is good coffee's grown at altitude. Altitude and latitude are similar things. So as long as your latitude doesn't have the extremes, like we're 35 degrees south here, which is not normally known for growing coffee. But because of our maritime climate, we can grow it quite successfully. You still need a microclimate, you still need north-facing slopes and good shelter to get the coffee to grow well. But we've achieved that here, and we're getting good yields. So
what was it when you got that book for your 50th birthday that piqued your interest about coffee? Was it that it was a challenge? There's so many different elements.
New crop.
And
with that crop, it looked like I could grow it in amongst the avocado trees. Which we've done successfully, because coffee is a shade-liking plant. It enjoys growing in shade. But what I've learned is that it produces better in full sun than it does in shade. Shade growing coffee is less productive. It can be high quality, but from what I've read, it's less productive. So it's a balance of shade, shelter, and temperature to get good coffee.
Shade, shelter, temperature.
Yeah. So that's when they describe a growing environment
Yeah.
in wine. They call it tiwa, which
Right.
is where you grow and your soils and your climate and the environment you're in.
Yeah.
But that's just part of growing coffee or any crop.
Mm-hmm.
So if your tiwa or your environment and your climate, and then you have varieties, and you have the way you manage your plants, how you water them and how you feed them. That's sort of the art.
Right.
So,
And you were saying before, all of them go into specialty coffee, right?
so that's the niche for us, the specialty
Right.
coffee.
Oh, got you.
And it's the only way you can actually make any money out of coffee, because we haven't got the scale to do commodity coffee here in New Zealand. So we have to grow specialty coffee to get that ideally that better price.
Okay.
So the difference in price between specialty coffee and commodity coffee is like commodity coffee selling at the moment, the highest prices ever is around $3 US a pound.
Right.
And normally it's sort of around $2, $2.50.
Oh.
So it's really a subsistence farming system or large-scale commercial where they've got big yields, big properties, and they use mechanical harvesting to harvest the beans.
Right.
So whereas specialty coffee is generally smaller scale, the right varieties in the right climate, hand-picked and processed in a certain way to achieve a flavour profile that your customer wants. And there's no one right flavour profile.
Okay.
Like the coffee you've just drunk, our coffee from last year, it's quite a mild, chocolatey, nutty flavour. And what I've learned is the way you process the coffee after you harvest it has a big bearing on your the quality and the flavour profile.
Right.
So
Yes.
Once we start on that, that's a big subject in itself.
Oh, is it? I was going to say, how many different flavours could you get out of one plant?
Well, if you picked, say, 100 kilos of coffee out of our block and split it up into 5 20-kilo lots on the same day harvested and processed it either by a wet process method, which is where you pick the beans, you pulp them, then you wash them and let them ferment in water over 28 to 48 hours. That's what they call the wet process. So the fermentation is the yeasts and the bacteria in the water and in the mucilage, which is around the beans, that eats away that sugary coating around the beans, the sticky sugary coating.
Okay.
And that through that process, that can add to the flavour profile of the bean, because a certain amount of that process will change the way that bean tastes.
Right.
So that's wet processing. Then you can do anaerobic processing, where you can either one of the ways I've been doing it is you just put the beans into a plastic bag with no oxygen, and then the beans, as they ferment and the yeast ferment the mucilage, will create a carbon dioxide environment for the beans to fermentation and eat the mucilage off, and that adds another flavour profile. So there's two different flavour profiles. We'll give you a slightly, we're about to test all that and see what our beans taste like once they've gone through these 5 or 6 steps, different processes. Then you can have another one called dry process, where the beans are picked and just let to dry in the sun.
Okay.
So you still leave the cherry on and all the mucilage on, and it just dries to like a raisin.
Huh.
And then once it's dried to a certain point, you then can hull it and take the green bean out of it by putting it through a machine, and then you roast that, and that'll give you another flavour profile.
Right.
And then another way that they've just started to perfect over the last 10 years or so is carbonic maceration, where you actually put the coffee cherries or the pulped coffee, either or, into a pressurised vessel, and you pump in carbon dioxide and put pressure in the vessel on top of the beans at say 20 psi, and that gives you another flavour profile.
Oh my
So basically
gosh.
it triggers a different chemical reaction in the beans. So you get another flavour profile. So
Who's discovering all of this?
well, it's a matter of reading and then experimenting
Right.
and then learning as you go.
Mm.
Because we know last year we got a cupping on that coffee
Yeah.
at 82 out of 100,
Oh.
which is in the specialty range. 80 to 100 is specialty coffee.
Right.
So we were just inside the specialty range.
Nice.
And from what these guys that know coffee and cupping evaluation are saying, by doing these different processing methods and keeping things tight as far as cleanliness and timing and measuring pH and doing all those things properly, you can end up adding to that score. So you can take that cupping score from what was basically 82 closer to 90.
Wow.
So what can change that cupping score as well as variety? So if you've got a better variety, like Geisha is a coffee that was grown in Panama and it's grown in a few other countries as well.
Yeah.
Again, it's a hybridization of that Arabica.
Right.
Geisha is a variety that's scored over 90
Right.
in the cupping score.
Wow.
And that Geisha sold for around about $3,000 a pound.
What?
Yeah, because it was a flavour profile that certain customers went after, and through competition at an auction, I think the price went right up to $3,000 a pound.
The scale, the 100 scale from commodity to specialty goes from $3 to $3,000.
Yeah. And even higher.
Wild.
Even higher. If you've got coffee that's right up there
Yeah.
in the mid-90s, and there are some varieties that are doing that now,
Yeah.
it can be up to $5,000 a kilo.
Wow.
A kilo, which is 2.5 pounds. So it's about $2,000 a pound.
So this person who's called Cuppa, is it Cuppa?
So they're trained experts in cupping coffee.
Right.
So have you ever seen when they drink wine and they slurp it
Yeah.
and they spit it?
They're like a coffee connoisseur.
Well, the coffee guys do something similar.
Right.
So they go through a course
Yeah.
where they're trained on how to cup coffee using a flavour wheel.
Oh.
So there's a whole range of different flavour profiles coffee can have, and there's actually more intense flavours, smells, and profiles in coffee than there is in wine.
Really?
There's a way wider profile of different flavours. So these guys are all trained in that system of being able to measure coffee flavour profiles, and then they score it
Right.
out of that scoring from 1 to 100. So we had our coffee tested by two trained cuppers together but independent of each other, using the same scale and the same system.
Yeah.
On the same day using the same coffee,
Yeah.
and they were within half a point of each other.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so do they have to come to the site and try the
So
coffee?
in this case, we went to the guy who roasted our coffee for us, because again, with so many different parts to this growing and processing and roasting coffee, you can't be an expert in everything.
Yeah.
So we take our coffee to a guy in Monterey, Turning Point Coffee,
Cool.
who Stu Hagi, who's very good at roasting. He's got very good experience and reputation at roasting coffee. So he roasted our coffee, but he's also a trained coffee scorer.
Oh, cool.
So he scored it, and a guy called Albert Kim, he also scored it too on the same day.
So is the vision to do the full spectrum of the process yourself, or are you happy to roast it outside?
Get it roasted outside at this point. I mean, I'll buy a nano roaster.
Yeah.
And do my own roasting just for sampling and working out and perfecting our processing methods.
Yeah.
But our commercial goal is we'll probably have that outsourced.
Yeah.
The roasting.
Right.
But we'll try and keep all the other processing in-house.
Yeah. Nice. I don't know, maybe I'm living under a rock. I didn't know New Zealand produced coffee full stop.
It didn't. But we, as I said earlier, we were part of a Forest Service nursery way back in the 70s and 80s. And we used to grow coffee for the indoor market, for the ornamental market, coffee plants. And that's where I first experienced growing coffee. And I knew it grew here in certain people's gardens. Didn't know it could be done commercially until I read that book.
Right. How long does it take for a plant to mature?
So you germinate the beans, you plant them out when they're about 18 months old, so they're about 250 high,
Yeah.
250 millimetres high, and then about 2 to 3 years in the field before you get a crop.
Wow.
And they'll produce like 100, 200 grams of cherry in that first year.
Yeah.
And then it'll progressively get up to around a kilo of cherry, maybe a kilo and a half per plant, depending on the variety.
Yeah.
You plant them at quite high densities because they tend to grow a bit like a Christmas tree in the shape, in a pyramid shape.
Yeah.
And they don't take up a lot of space, so you can plant up to 2,500 plants per hectare.
Whoa. 2,500?
1,000 plants per hectare.
Oh, so they're fine being neighbours with
Yeah, you can grow them in amongst each other.
Yeah.
And you can grow them with temporary shelter crops as well, like bananas or avocados or whatever, to get them started.
Oh, so was that part of the decision because it doesn't interfere with the
Initially,
avocados? Yeah.
Because Julie wouldn't let me pull everything out and plant coffee until I could prove it. So we've proven that now that we can grow it and we can get a commercial crop on the varieties we've got, and we're at the starting point of producing specialty coffee at 82.
Right.
And what these guys said to me is if I can improve the way I process the coffee, because I was very agricultural in the past, how we processed the coffee, nothing was clean, nothing was measured, it was just basically put it out there and let it soak and then washed it off and dried it and got it roasted.
Just get it done sort of approach. Yeah.
So if you get more scientific and more methodical in the way you go about it, you can get a better result.
Right.
So the variety we've got, we've actually sent some samples away to a laboratory in Sweden to be genome tested, so we can find out what the variety was, what it is, because there's no written record of what our variety is.
Fun.
But they came back and they said they don't know.
Oh.
They've found the DNA and they've measured the DNA of it all.
Yeah.
So we're yet to try and analyse what the DNA data means.
Right.
So we're trying to find that out now.
Wow.
We've given the results to New Zealand Plant and Food.
Yeah.
Who's New Zealand Science on Horticulture.
Cool.
And they're helping us with trying to decipher this genome.
Fun.
So once we know what the genome is, we can then isolate the variety that we have.
Right.
And then, based on that, we can make some decisions about the commercial viability of the variety. Because you also have to use international data on coffee to evaluate what variety you have that's going to suit your climate.
Okay.
So our variety might be okay, but there could be better varieties.
Right. So when you said you're testing 5 different processes, will that help that decision too, or is it more the labour side of things that will make that decision?
The 5 different processes post-harvest are really to see what's the best one that suits our coffee.
Okay.
And pick on one.
Yeah.
Because to try and do a whole lot of different ones all the time is quite labour intensive and it's quite intense. So if say carbonic maceration makes our coffee taste really good and it gives us a better return, then we'll go down that road.
Whoa.
But if it's just anaerobic or if it's just normal wet processing, we'll stay with that and run with that with the variety we have. So New Zealand has a quite strict quarantine protection to protect our current horticultural industries and farming industries.
Yeah.
So we can't just bring new plant material into New Zealand without going through quite an intense process.
Yeah.
There's a set of criteria that you have to meet
to
bring plant material into New Zealand, and coffee's also has to meet that criteria. And there's only certain countries that we can bring plant seed material in for growing. We can bring coffee material in from all countries for roasting because it's a destructive process. It's not going to, but you're not able to bring green beans in to grow.
Got you.
Without going through the correct process.
Right. Are there many people in the Far North doing it?
So we're at the beginning of a sort of an evolution on growing coffee.
Right.
There's a guy growing about the same time he's been growing coffee as we have. He's more commercial in the sense that he was already selling and like roasting and selling coffee at the markets and the various places around the north. And he's been sort of more commercial than we have. We've been just experimenting and learning.
Right.
But he's been growing a different variety.
Yeah.
He's got some plant material, some bourbon out of New Caledonia, which is a dwarf coffee.
Ah.
And he's been growing that and roasting it. And he's got a very good cupping score, around 87.
Wow.
Yeah, he's very successful, but he likes to do things by himself. He's just doing his own thing.
Okay.
So what we're involved with is there's a Ministry of Primary Industries set up some funding.
Yeah.
Through one of the Maori lending branches of MPI.
Yeah.
And they're trying to promote coffee as an industry for Maori, for iwi, and also for any individual that wants to start growing it.
Right.
So we've just formed an association of Specialty Coffee Growers Association.
Cool.
And we're putting together all the rules and everything around that.
Wow.
So I'm on that committee helping them with some of the ideas on it.
The vision is to just grow the industry in New Zealand.
Yes, find out where it can be grown. That's the first goal, is do a lot of trials and plant coffee around the area and just see where it grows well.
Wow.
But it's like anything, you've got to put a lot of effort into after you plant it, make sure you look after it before you can actually get a positive result.
So are your plants 15 years old, or you've been researching for 15 years?
Some of the older ones are 15 years old,
Really?
and the plant material came out of a local exotic nurseries family I know, the Austin family, who had been growing all sorts of different tropical plants for many years. And I found that plant material there, and they said, take some plants, take some seeds, and see what you can do with it.
Okay.
So it's actually their variety originally.
Yeah.
But they don't know the history of it.
Right.
Their father used to travel the world with various people collecting plant material when it was legal to bring it back into New Zealand.
Wow.
Now it's not so easy to do it. Yeah.
And you said something interesting before, I think, because I never knew that you initially were going to get into macadamias.
Yeah, macadamias was the crop that interested us. Big problem with macadamias in New Zealand, it's a slightly different variety. We've got a temperate climate variety here.
Right.
Called Tetraphylia, I think it's called.
Oh.
And it's got a prickly edge leaf.
Right.
And it produces a nut that's highly flavoursome, but is very hard shell to crack.
Right.
So you end up with a lot of broken kernels.
Yeah.
So it's not as commercially viable as I think it's Intricafolia, which is the main variety they grow in Hawaii and in Queensland and Australia.
Yeah.
So it originated in Australia, macadamias, as a variety.
Right. Interesting.
And then it was taken to Hawaii, and they grow on a large scale in Hawaii and in South Africa and around the world.
Oh, wow.
But macadamias are, they're an interesting crop.
Yeah. Do you think it was a blessing in disguise that didn't happen?
Yeah, there's a couple of guys growing commercially here in New Zealand, growing macadamias. It's like everything, it's about learning about your crop and understanding the input requirements and the way that things need to be looked after to grow properly to get the production. Like avos, we've learnt so much on how we grow up here and how we've got a sandy loam soil here, and it's very, very dry and lacks nutrients, so we have to add everything and manage things a lot more than people do with volcanic soils, for instance.
Right. For as long as I've known you, which I worked out the other day is 18 years, can you believe? 18 years. You've always had fingers in pies. You've always had lots of things on the go.
Yeah.
But you've never seemed overwhelmed or stressed. And you've never like you always just seem like you love what you do.
Yeah.
How? Why? What's the secret?
Well, I think like I said earlier, you've got to be wired a certain way to do something for yourself.
Yeah.
You got to. Like I worked for the courts for 12 years as a bailiff.
Did you?
So while I was developing the orchard, we needed income.
Yeah. So
I knew a guy at the courthouse.
Yeah.
And he said, "Do you want a job as the bailiff?" And I said, "What does it entail?" And he said, "Well, here's 2,500 fines warrants. Go out and serve them on everybody and seize property." So they threw me in the deep end, and that's stressful. So I think when you do certain things in your life that are stressful,
Yeah.
you get perspective on things. So you know the worst thing is for yourself. And that was tough. That was 12 years of, and it was progressively worse every year
Yeah.
as social problems became worse and worse.
Right.
And in the end, I'd had enough.
Yeah.
And we went full-time developing orchards and
Yeah.
looking after our orchard.
Yeah.
So you get perspective. You get perspective, and you learn not to get too stressed about things, because you can't change what you can't change
Yeah.
in life.
Yeah.
You know, like certain things out of your control that you can't get too stressed about and worry about, because you can't fix them. You can only fix the stuff that you do,
Yeah.
and that you're interested in. So I think the golden thing in life is having a goal, having something you're interested in, and then chasing it.
Right.
And that's the fun part. And you may not be successful.
Yeah.
A lot of things I've touched, haven't like we bought 5,000 Lord Howe palms, Kentia and Hedeskep palms into New Zealand, thinking we're going to slay the landscape market, and I've still got half of them.
Right.
So things don't always work out.
Just 2,500 pounds.
Yeah, they're still in their nursery over here. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like everything, give it a go.
Yeah. How do you not let that wobble you then?
Oh, there's lots of things that contribute to that.
Yeah.
Family's number one.
Yeah.
Having a good partner and who supports you. Because there's nothing worse than getting up every morning and fighting with your partner, and how are you going to take on the rest of the world if you're coming from that environment. So positive family environments, number one. And having 4 beautiful kids and 12 grandkids and a new great-grandchild on the way.
Yeah. Oh my
cool.
gosh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I did hear about that. So then, like you said before, it's important to have a goal.
Yeah.
I think sometimes there's a bit of pressure to be very specific about every single step towards that goal.
Again, you've got to be careful that you don't take too much on and get distracted and end up doing nothing.
Yeah.
One of my hobbies is carving.
Right.
I like carving wood.
Right.
So a few years ago, when things were a bit tough here, I went to Australia for 2 years.
Yeah.
And worked in the sandalwood industry.
Oh.
And got a passion for carving sandalwood. So I bought a whole lot of stuff home that I carved. And, little things like that are distractions. So you need a hobby in life, you need a distraction as well.
Right.
But you've got to have a single-minded vision about what you want. Recently we bought 2 or 3 properties that have been distressed properties.
Right.
And I had a vision. I wanted those properties.
Right.
And like I said to you before, once you, and it's the same with the orcharding business, with the growing things. You just decide what you want. You say, yeah, we're going after that. And then subconsciously, your brain takes over.
Right.
So every day, you get out of bed in the morning, and there's this conscious and subconscious thought in that direction.
Right.
And it takes care of itself.
For you, was that when you started out, did you say to yourself, I want to own an orchard, and you didn't specify what type of fruit or anything?
Not really.
Yeah.
I had a liking for certain crops. Macadamias was initially the first crop.
Yeah.
Because we grew a lot of macadamias in the nursery for a commercial guy down south.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'll give that a go.
Right.
And I had a few trees, and we started to grow them, and then I found out more about them, and then that's when the Avo thing popped up.
Right.
And it just evolved from there.
That's quite relieving in a way, because I think sometimes, you do get that pressure to be so specific about your goals.
No, you don't have to.
That you feel like you have to be a fortune teller.
No, you can't. I mean, it pays to learn as much as you can. I mean, in this day and age with AI and with Google and internet, there's no excuse.
Yeah.
If you want to know about a subject, you can find out pretty quick. You don't need a degree in it to learn about it and specialise, because it's all there.
Yeah.
I mean, the power of a degree is less and less important nowadays, apart from the discipline of it, getting it.
That's true.
So the information's all there. You don't have to learn it and forget it like people have done in the past, because that's what's happening with most people. They've got to go back to the books.
Yeah, there is a lot at your fingertips.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary and exciting at the same time.
Yeah, But the world's an exciting place.
Yeah.
We've travelled a lot.
Yeah.
I've been to Mexico, California, South Africa, mainly with avos, looking
Right.
at different avo growing environments.
Right.
And it's fascinating what other people are doing.
Yeah.
So you're always learning.
Right.
And you've got to have an open mind. You've got to be a sponge.
Is that what keeps you going? The
Yeah.
idea that there's something you don't know out there, and then you.
Oh, partly, yeah. That's part
Yeah.
of the journey is learning, knowing that there's new stuff out there.
Yeah.
I got quite interested last year in citrus again. We grew
Ah.
citrus a few years ago,
Yeah.
and there's all these new innovative ways to grow citrus.
Right.
The Australians are doing a wonderful job on a lot of those new innovations, like trellising, growing citrus on a wire trellis like they do with apples. And once you start to do that and present the fruit in a two-dimensional format rather than a 3D tree,
Oh.
you put
Yeah,
the fruit
true.
all on a wall.
Yeah.
It's easier to spray, it's easier to harvest,
Oh.
it's easier to count the fruit, it's easier to prune, all those things,
Wow.
because of the intensive way you grow,
Yeah.
give you a whole lot of new opportunities and new benefits come along with that.
Wow.
But then I found out with the variety I wanted to grow, the price to the grower hasn't changed in 25 years.
Oh.
Still $1.50 a kilo
Wow.
orchard gate return. And I
Wow.
decided, we won't bother with that, because you want a crop
Yeah.
that's going to give you a decent return for the amount of investment you're going to make.
Yeah.
And that's where I like coffee.
Right.
If you can get good at growing coffee and get into that specialty range and get up around that sort of, you're not going to get all your coffee in that category, but even if you get, the potential is $150,000 a hectare if you grow it right and get it right.
Right.
So that's the goal. There's
Yeah.
money to be made and there's a journey to be had.
Yeah. How do you define success, or what does success mean to you? Is there too many factors?
There's a lot of things. It's not money.
Yeah.
Money's important, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not my driving
Yeah.
thing. It's about achieving things. Really.
Right.
It's giving it a go and getting there and achieving it.
Right. So when you're looking at pricing, you're thinking about, like, I want to be able to sustain what I do.
Yeah, it's the
Can this
viability of
sustain?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got to aim high to get somewhere in between.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the avo industry here at the moment. We've had
Yeah.
3 years of very poor returns to
Right.
the grower, orchard gate returns, below what it costs to grow.
Right.
But then there's all these other contributing factors going on where a lot of the orchards are old. They haven't replanted trees. They haven't
Right.
reinvigorated the orchards with new genetic material,
Right.
new plant material. So the production's gone down. Trees are bigger. The quality of the fruit's gone down. With the return dropping as well, they're not viable anymore. And that would be probably 50% of the orchards up here
Right.
at the moment.
Okay.
They haven't retooled. Whereas the guys that
Okay.
have progressively planted new trees as the old trees have got too old and too hard to grow, it's still got the production and the quality, and they can sustain the lower price for longer.
Yeah. Which goes back to what you're saying, like, keep learning, keep pivoting and adapting, and always stay on top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to keep being innovative
Yeah.
to stay ahead of the game.
Right.
You
And
can't just sit and wait.
yeah. Does orchard gate mean the price you get?
Orchard
once
gate return. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
your net return before your growing costs come out of it. So
Okay.
it's the price you get less all the commissions and all the
Okay.
charges,
Oh,
packing
before.
charges and everything.
Wow.
So it's the net number that comes back to your gate before you take out your growing costs
Wow.
and your wages. Or whatever.
Okay, yeah, so citrus not changing in 25 years is
Yeah,
bonkers.
it is.
That's crazy.
And again, it's because of that mix of commodity and specialist.
Right.
The big citrus orchards around the world have kept the price low because they can afford to grow at scale
Right.
and keep the price low. And the
Okay.
supermarkets generally make all the money.
Oh. Do you
Oh.
think that deteriorates horticulture in general, the fact that new people can't really come in because the price is too unappealing?
Yeah, but that's where the innovative guys
Right.
can make a difference.
Right.
So you look at apples.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating crop, but it's been commercially grown for thousands of years
Right.
by man. Whereas a lot of these new, like avocados and even citrus, haven't been grown on a large commercial scale until the last sort of 100 and 150 years. So apples have evolved a lot further in their growing techniques than most other crops.
Right.
So at the moment they're growing apples in the Hawke's Bay using a FOP system, Future Orchard Production, FOP.
Right.
And they're doing those two-dimensional trellises.
Okay.
So they grow about 5 wires, they train the tree up to a bottom wire, and they grow two leaders on a 20-degree angle
Yeah.
to get the length they need. You have to grow, to get a plant to grow any length, it's got to be more than 20 degrees on the vertical to grow. If you tie a plant like that, it won't grow.
Right.
Because it's apical dominance. Plants will only grow vertically generally.
Really?
That's the way they've evolved.
Right.
So you've got to grow them to get the length, and then you tie them down.
Wow.
And that's called the planar cordon system on a FOPS base. So then they grow those two lateral leaders down on a bottom wire, and then they grow vertical fruiting branches up from those, up the trellis.
Wow.
And you can get 5 columns on each side, so up to 10 vertical columns.
So you're kind of stimulating lots of different trees, but it's one tree.
One tree, but all these vertical growing points
that
produce fruit on each growing point, up to about 3 metres high.
Wow.
So they've taken commercial apple production from a single 3-dimensional tree at around sort of 12 tonne, maybe 20 tonne to the hectare, up to 180 tonne to the hectare, growing on a wire trellis on a planar cordon 2D system.
Wow.
At sort of 3 metre spacings down the row. So you can see suddenly, if you're getting that kind of yield, and you're still getting the same return per kilo, but you're getting 20 times the amount of volume or more per hectare, you're viable.
You're fine,
So it's about being innovative with all these crops.
Wow.
So we're going to play around with different ways to grow coffee.
Right.
I think that system on a trellis could work as well.
True, yeah.
Because coffee, as soon as you tip a coffee plant past that 20 degrees and lay it down, it'll stop growing the end point.
Yeah.
But it'll grow new leaders all the way along the branch.
Yeah.
So you can have 7 or 8 coffee plants off one plant.
Wow.
And grow that on a trellis system as well.
Great.
They're experimenting in Australia with that 2D system in citrus, and they're learning, how to grow it that way, how to spray it, how to prune it, and improve the yields per hectare.
Do you think you'll ever stop doing any of this, ever?
They'll probably find me dead in the orchard. No, I won't stop.
I don't see you stopping ever. There'll probably be something else next time I visit.
Just make use of me after I'm dead. Bury me under a tree.
Coffee or ever.
Yeah. Stick a hole and leave me there. No, you got to stay doing stuff.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as retirement.
Yeah.
It's just you slow down a bit because your body says you can't do what you used to be able to do.
Yeah. Do you agree with that saying that says if you do something you love, you'll never work a day?
Exactly.
Yeah. Is that your ethos?
Oh, there's a bit. Yeah, I follow that. I get out of bed every morning and there's always something to do.
Yeah.
Some days you're a bit tired, but you're tired, you go and swim in the pool or go to the beach.
Yeah. I love that. Oh, thanks for sitting and chatting with me.
That's all right. No
I loved
problem.
it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And now I feel like I know so much more about coffee. My favourite hobby.
Yeah.
Can coffee be my hobby?
Yeah, no reason why not.